Psalm 17, 35, 54, and 63. Well, mixed into many of our psalms, of course, are all sorts of genre or styles of literature. The idea of a hymn, lament, thanksgiving, confidence, poem of remembrance, of wisdom, celebrating a king. There's almost no way to limit the amount or the kinds of literature that we can find in the Psalms. One of them, and it seems to be a subcategory of the lament, and when you start watching for it, you'll see it everywhere, is the imprecation. To imprecate someone is to curse them, to wish evil upon them. Psalm 35:4 we read this time, "Put him to shame, let him come to destruction." Sounds, in one sense, you could read that maybe innocently, but as one author says, when you read or watch for it, the imprecations or the cursings are festering, gloating, and undisguised. And so I think one of the first things we need to do when we talk about the imprecation psalms is to admit that they're there, and they can sound very cruel. Another thing to notice is that back in Leviticus 19:17, we have a law in Torah that you should not hate your brother in your heart. So the idea of wanting to hurt someone, even in your heart, was not allowed by the law. I think both of these things need to be in our awareness before we even talk about why do we have this kind of language in the Psalms. And the reason we're going to talk about it with these Psalms today is because this is a common feeling between David and Saul, as Saul is trying to kill David. In fact, that seems to be one of the first things I think we need to bring into our discussion, is that we have in the stories of these imprecations an actual desire of an enemy of God trying to kill or hurt David, let's say, or Saul against David. So when you mix together the personality of a David and the actuality of a Saul trying to kill him, you can see why the pendulum can swing so quickly for David from glorifying God to wishing evil upon Saul. It's just part of his personality. Here's how C.S. Lewis puts it. Those who are readiest to die for a cause may easily become those who are readiest to kill. The higher the stakes, the greater the temptation to lose your temper over the game. And that sounds just like David, does it not? Another thing that we should remember, and this comes into David and Saul as well, remember that David had an opportunity twice to kill Saul and did not take it. It shows, or it goes to show, that these cursings are actually going up to God first, and then giving those thoughts to God, in a sense, and asking him to come down and do these things. So David does not try to kill Saul, but he'll say some things to God about his desire. And I think there's a difference there to be understood. Again, when it comes to almost a diary, these Psalms are human emotion to his God. And when we put it that way, it's not surprising that we hear what we do. The last thing to mention is that this is probably one of the best things we can do with the Psalms, is realize that when we read these lines, even of imprecation, we're really hearing ourselves and the way we really are when we admit it. One of my favorite writers is Walter Brueggemann, and he says this: "The robustness and candor of the Psalms are especially evident in the articulation of hatred and anger. There is no thought here that Israel must be on good behavior in the presence of God. But in the moment of hatred, that is what happens to all of us. This anger is not only spiritually liberating, it is psychologically honest." And then he ends by saying this: "To be a Jew in the biblical story is to place the greatest store in knowledge and loyalty, and it is because a Jew remains attached to his God that he is permitted to question him. It is because the prophets loved the people of Israel that they admonished them and reprimanded their kings. Everything depends on where you stand," my master used to say. "With God, anything can be said. Without God, nothing is heard."